Welcome to Patron Night of the 69th Annual Detroit Jewish Book Fair. And what a book fair it has been so far. What an incredible program. And I couldn't be more proud of this year's lineup and our professional and lay team who are delivering it to you, albeit over the internet. I want to give a particular shout out to Brenda Brook and the Distinguished Book Fair Committee who worked tirelessly, even while remotely, to make book fair happen in a first-class fashion, and to our professional staff, Jamie Loeb, our remarkable director, of Metropolitan Detroit and the United Jewish Foundation, who are our largest donors and partners in everything that the JCC does. And lastly, and most importantly, I want to thank you, our patrons, our community, who so generously support and make this spectacular book fair possible. You are the reason we do what we do. In fact, the JCC's mission, the why we exist, has always been to build Jewish community here in Detroit. What has changed over time is how we do it. When JCCs were built and rebuilt and ultimately overbuilt, the JCC performed its mission to build Jewish community principally by providing safe space for people to congregate and recreate in a world that didn't feel all that welcoming. Today, however, most Jewish people, and particularly young people, feel reasonably safe in the larger community and don't look to the JCC to provide them with a place of their own. At the same time, every study and every serious focus group on Jewish life comes to the same conclusion. Now more than ever, Jewish people are seeking to engage with other Jewish people as the need to connect over Jewish topics and issues is stronger than ever. And the way to build Jewish community is more Jewish people doing more Jewish things more often. If these studies are correct, and if they are not, then we all got it wrong. Then there's no more important engine for building Jewish community in Detroit than your JCC. We may no longer be the traditional JCC that your parents remember, but no institution provides more world-class Jewish engagement in Detroit than your JCC, and there's no better example of the type of excellent programming we provide than this book fair. A recent study revealed that the JCC impacts over 50% of the Detroit Jewish community every year through programs. Did you know that the JCC hosts over 65 events every week? How is that even possible? So with all of that as background, and with a heart filled with gratitude in these difficult times, I respectfully turn the mic over to one of the JCC's great leaders, Terry Hollander. Terry, our hearts, especially at this time, are with you.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. Good evening and welcome to the JCC of Metro Detroit's 69th Annual Detroit Jewish Book Fair. I'm Terry Hollander, and I am the immediate past chair of Book Fair. I'm also on the executive committee at the JCC. It is my pleasure to welcome you on this Saturday evening, the beginning of Patron Appreciation Weekend, to hear Tovah Feldshuh, author of LILYVILLE, Mother, Daughter, and Other Roles I've Played, presented in partnership with the 2020 Ann Arbor Jewish Book Festival. The goal of the Detroit Jewish Book Fair is to bring the best new Jewish books and authors from around the world to Metro Detroit. This year, the rooms we're all sitting in may be different, but that purpose remains. The book fair runs until December 9, and we have an exceptional lineup of events planned. To see our full event schedule, learn about ways to support book fair, watch events you may have missed, and find our online store where you can pre-order LILYVILLE before its April release and many other hand-selected books and gifts. Visit our website at culturalarts.jccdet.org/bookfair on your screen. This year, in order to provide as much programming to the community as possible, we've made all of our events free of charge. So if you enjoy this event and other book fair events, please consider becoming a patron or donating to Book Fair. You can do either or both at our website, culturalarts.jccdet.org/bookfair. We rely on community support to make this annual event possible, so thank you in advance for becoming part of our family. We would like to thank Sandy and Steve Matz and the Berman Center for the Performing Arts for co-sponsoring tonight's program. I also want to extend our deepest gratitude to the Book Fair Committee. This has been a challenging year indeed, and your dedication, commitment, and hard work have made this exciting festival possible. We have a very special event for you this evening, and we want you to be part of it. You can ask questions and offer comments in the YouTube comment section below, or by texting the number in the corner of your screen. Our speaker will take as many of your questions as she can. While you're here at the YouTube channel, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the reminder bell. That way you'll never miss any of our exciting events. The focus of tonight's event is the memoir, LILYVILLE, Mother, Daughter, and Other Roles I've Played. We have the pleasure of having the author, Tovah Feldshuh, as well as Jamie Loeb, Senior Director of Cultural Arts at the JCC, who will be moderating our discussion. Tovah is a Broadway and TV actress and a 6-time Emmy and Tony nominee, has won 4 Drama Desk Awards, 4 Outer Critics Circle Awards, 3 Drama Logs, and an Obie. She is a playwright, concert artist, and author, and is the recipient of the Israel Peace Medal, the Eleanor Roosevelt Humanities Award, and was honored as Hadassah's Mother of the Year. Tovah has always played very powerful women. Golda Meir, in fact, right on our own Berman stage, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Yentl, Mama Rose, and Tallulah. But off stage, she struggled with a role she never auditioned for, Lily Feldshuh's only daughter. Please join me in welcoming Tovah Feldshuh and Jamie Loeb.
Hello. Hello. Thank you so much for the introduction, Terry, and also Brian. And thank you, Tovah, so much for being here. I'm such a fan of your work. It is just a joy to be here in your presence, even though we're not physically in the same space. So thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for being here, Jamie.
Oh, so we are very excited to be kicking off Patron Appreciation Weekend. And I do want to remind all of our patrons in the audience that we have pre-ordered a copy of this book for you, and you will receive it hot off the press in April. So if you become a patron, you still have some time. You can get that copy in April. Magically, it will appear to you. So highly recommended. So you've done everything there is to do in terms of performing, right? TV, Broadway, movies. And now you've written a book. So tell us why you wrote this book in particular.
Well, Hachette book publishers have asked me to write a book. And when they asked me to write this book, they probably expected phenomenal opening nights, glorious curtain calls, backstage love affairs. And there is some of that in the book. But what they didn't expect was my interpreting my life through the eyes of my mother, because the longest, most profound role I've ever played was Lillian Kaplan Feldshuh's daughter. And as Terry mentioned, a part I never auditioned for. And since the death of this extraordinary woman at over 103 years old, I felt compelled to tell her story and mine, and how the two of us had a lifelong journey toward each other. In essence, I dig down into the primal relationship between parent and child, the specifics between mother and daughter. And I couldn't envision my memoir, and this is the first book I've ever written, in any other form but the format I knew best, which was as a theater piece. So I've written the book in 3 acts with 2 intermissions. And instead of chapters, I give you scenes. Instead of a foreword, I give you an overture. Instead of an epilogue, I give you exit music, and a series of many, many extraordinary anecdotes that elucidate Lily's humor, wisdom, wit, and her mental acuity right through the 103 years of her life.
It is a wonderful form. So I got to read an advance copy, perks of the job.
Thank
I
you.
don't usually go in for the celebrity memoir, to be honest, because I like to just enjoy the person's work and not necessarily know that much about them. But this really kept my interest because I think of that arc of the relationship between you and your mother. The anecdotes were wonderful, but they had a coherence because of that focus. So she died. It wasn't that long ago. So was writing this, did it feel like part of your grieving process, or was it, I've completed the grieving process and now I can share?
No, I think that's a brilliant question. When we lose there's no good time to lose a parent. And I had my parent into my 60s. So I was lucky. I was born when my mother was 40, and which was almost unheard of in those days. I mean, you didn't have all the aids that they have now. So when she died, I wanted to write a television series about her, but I don't know how to write a pilot yet. I'm going to learn how to do that as well. So I was asked what happened. The actual story, this incredible agent, Albert Lee, heard me give an interview on NPR. And he called my managers and said, I think this actress has a writer's voice. Do you represent Tovah Feldshuh, and does she have a literary agent? And they said no. And he said, may I represent her? And he came to my house, to this living room. I'm now in my dining room. And he came to my house and said, what do you want to write about? And I said, I'd like to write about my mother, Lily, and call it Lilyville, this universe. Lily, you know, though I have starred on Broadway and in films and television, all those pieces took place in Lilyville. Lilyville was my universe, if you will, where all these things happened. And she was the monarch during her robust 103 years on this planet, and in my mind's eye, who overlooked my life, certainly very closely for the first quarter of my life, first 25 years, you know, eternally now and forever after, for happiness and for exasperation. And I thought that our journey, you know, she had to survive so many cultural changes. She lived for over 100 years. She was born 9 years before women got the vote. She was born with her mother in corset. She was born 9 years before the beginning of the 20s. On her 12th birthday, she saw the Yankee Stadium open, and Babe Ruth beat the Red Sox 4-1 with a grand slam home run. And before that, when they moved to the Bronx from 17th Street and 2nd Avenue, before my mother was born, her older sister got pneumonia, and they said, Rosie will die unless you get her to the country. And they got her to the Bronx, which is, of course, named after the family, the Bronkers, who owned a huge farmland. The Bronkers owned a huge farmland. That's why we say, we're going to Manhattan, we're going to Brooklyn, we're going to Queens, but we're going to the Bronx. It comes from the Bronkers. Anyway, outside 1534 Charlotte Street, which was the brownstone in which they lived, were wildflowers and the horizon. And when you're brought up with a vista, I don't think she ever got over it. She wasn't rich by any measure, but she always had a view, and she would always say to me, if you love nature, you'll always be rich. And she always prized a view. She would even say, if we're going to a restaurant, please get me the corner table because I'd like a view of the room. And when we went to Sardi's, she said, I would like a corner table because I'd like a view of the room and that fakakta caricature they've done of you. So she was very tough. Tovah, I rate your parts by how you look. Dolly Levi was a 10. Golda Meir is a 0. She was very tough. But she kept my head on. She kept my head screwed on straight. And my older brother David, and I were not spoiled. We were provided for, but we were not overindulged. I remember the rich girls had 18 pairs of papagallos, and I had 2, one for Fridays and one for parties. And and everything was measured. And it doesn't mean I was deprived, but there were limits on things. It's probably why I went into the arts, so that my imagination could be unbridled and limitless. And that's where our conflict was born, particularly until I married my Harvard lawyer. Then they started to ease up because I married somebody within a value system that she could understand. And Freud would have to do no work on this because I loved my father, and he was a Harvard lawyer. He was a litigator. I played him in Law and Order. I just took Sidney Feldshuh and just put him inside me and became Daniel Melnick in Law and Order. And I married a boy who's a big time negotiator, Andrew Harris Levy, who went to Harvard College and Harvard Law. And I'm telling you, my mother built a throne to that man, a pedestal to the shrine of Andrew Harris Levy for saving her daughter. So anyway.
So it's interesting in the book. I think you do a wonderful job of being honest about the conflicts you had with your mother, but also understanding of the world she came from, the world she grew up in, and the world she lived in that was different from your world, right?
Yes.
And it's really amazing the compassion you have for her.
I think, I got lucky, as many people get lucky in this wonderful country of ours, and a country that is soon going to be much more wonderful when we have sanity again in Washington. But I had two wonderful parents. My father knew death early. His father died when he was 16, and brokenhearted, he didn't apply to the Ivy League. He went to NYU, which is like his local school, and there he met my beautiful mother. Her locker was next to Tovah Feldshuh. His older sister was going to law school in 1930. And that's how they happened to bump into each other. But my father knew death from that, and he knew death from the war. He was in the intelligence under Dwight David Eisenhower. And boy, when I was born, I was his only infant born after the war in the McCarthy era, and David was born during the war. So he never let me go. I was his proof that life should go on. He was an unbridled optimist, and my mother met life with much more fear, which is interesting because my father literally battled and would spend his entire life as a litigator jousting with words. He was a wordsmith where he'd write his own scripts, and every man, he would say in those days, but I write in them, every human being is entitled to, is innocent until proven guilty and entitled to a fair trial under due process of law. I remember all these quotes. So I had these two very good parents, and I had a mother that was much colder than my father. And it was tough. And I asked David, whom I worship, my older brother, David, who was head of the theater at Cornell and a medical doctor. So he's a PhD in theater and an MD as a medical doctor. We call him Dr. Dave. My mother called him God. So as I said to David, how did we know that mommy even loved us? And he said, mommy loved us because she was always there. And that was the truth, but it was incomprehensible to me because she was shut off emotionally, very shy emotionally, at least with us. In the first years of my life, in the formative years of my life, I was very lonely.
Well, it's tough, but she was there for you, and it's great. You're now able to recognize that as love in its own way.
It was love. It was deeds fueled by mitzvahs and not words. And there's that wonderful book about the 5 ways of loving people, and some people need words.
Yep.
I remember when I was teaching my beautiful son, Brandon. I have 2 wonderful children, Brandon Levy and Amanda Levy-Rizzoe, who's about to give birth to her second child. But I would say to Brandon, always remember women love beautiful flowers and they love words, that they love poetry. They want to hear you say you love them. That's foreplay for a woman. You need verbiage, at least I find that. So I had a mother who was who somehow was told that she would be rewarded if she were quiet, if she didn't take up the space that the man was to occupy. And even my father as a little boy was called Sonny, and I called Brandon Sonny's son. So he took up the light, and she would stand next to the spotlight and feel the warmth, but she never intruded on it. And somehow that got transmitted to us. And I thought it was really unfortunate. And then this wild thing happened when my father died, which is that my mother, like her name, bloomed like a rubrum lily. She just expanded and became much more unbridled and much more like the fantasies of her youth. And it was we had the gift of time to work out all sorts of kinks, and we had the mortar that we could smooth over the gaps in our relationship. And it was really lucky. It was really lucky.
I do want to pause for a moment and remind everyone that you can pre-order this book at our online bookstore. There's a link to it in the chat, so feel free to click that. We'll still be here, don't worry. So
some of the anecdotes are worth it. I mean, because of Lily's.
yes, I would love to hear. So obviously we want people to read the book. So
right,
share
of course.
some of maybe just like your 2 favorites.
Okay, well, I'll give you a taste of it, a taste of what Lilyville is like. The phone rings. I'm paraphrasing, of course. The phone rings, and I look at the ID on my iPhone, and it says Barry Weissler on it. And I said, Broadway producer Barry Weissler, I think I'll take this call. So I pick up the phone, and there's Barry saying, hey, Tovah, we'd like you to do Pippin for us on Broadway. Why don't you come down to the Music Box Theater and play on the trapeze? We would like to see if trapeze is part of your world. I'm just a middle-class kid from Scarsdale, so trapeze wasn't fully part of my world. Doing my homework and playing classical piano, that was my world. Anyway, I biked down to the Music Box Theater from the Upper West Side where I live, and I no sooner walk in the door than I'm hoisted 30 feet in the air on a trapeze, no mat, no safety belt, no insurance. So I'm hanging from the rafters of the Music Box Theater, and Barry Weissler calls up to me. He says, hey, Tovah, are you scared? And I realize, no. Are you? And I got the damn role without singing a note or dancing a step, because I could fly or be on a trapeze. So my mother would come to every show I ever did. Wait a minute, Tovah, she would say. I'm not coming to see you in the Virginia monologues. I can't say the word. But 3 women in black dresses in front of music stands talking about their Chachburgers. Forget it. So if you're pretty and there's movement and there's color, give me a call. So I decide to take her to a matinee of Pippin. There's color, there's movement, and I look fabulous in this bustier with these fishnet stockings. I'm 112 pounds. It's what I weighed in 7th grade and what I weigh now, incidentally, having been so healthy and never gone to a restaurant for so many months. And I take her to the matinee, and I'm playing Grandma Berta, and Grandma Berta sings a hit song from the show called No Time at All, while I'm doing a full-out trapeze act. As I'm singing that simultaneously, I'm doing a full-out trapeze act. Some of the song I sing literally hanging from my knees upside down. So if you do what the part requires, you bring down the house. And I stopped the show that day. I was thrilled because my mother was there. And after the show, I go to my mother and I say, Mommy, like I'm still looking for my mother's milk. Mommy, how did I do? She said, Tovah, that you should still have to earn a living like this and on a trapeze yet. So that's my mother, Lily. She did not give an inch. When I played Prime Minister Golda Meir, she always said to me, I rate your parts by how you look. Dolly Levi's a 10, Golda Meir, 0. Not giving up, I still took her to the matinee of Hair. It was an actor's benefit. And it had movement, and it had color, and it had Will Swenson, the lead, who at the end of the show comes out into the audience and straddles the armrests of an audience member. So he chooses my mother's armrest. I am telling you, that boy is over my mother like the Arch of St. Louis in his loincloth. So my mother's sitting there in her St. John's knit with the double strand of pearls, and she looks up. He's just looking up at his crotch. She looks down. She looks up. He's over her. She looks down. And I timidly say as the house lights come up, Mom, how did you like Act 1? She said, like it? I haven't had sex like this since Daddy died. And that is an example of some of the stuff that is in Lilyville. So
your mother is quite a character.
She went to see Miss Saigon and she said, isn't the point of theater not to have the helicopter? When I wanted to go to Juilliard, when I was graduating from Scarsdale, I wanted to go to Juilliard, and she turned to me, she said, you're not going to a trade school. So this is what I had to deal with. And it's not that it's that distinguished, but for me, she was my world. And it was a struggle uphill when she put that breast away 6 weeks after I was born into an airtight, a brassiere, and warmth was now dominated by shyness that no infant could comprehend. There were consequences, and we had a lot to work out. And this book is about that journey. And I hope, just like the Trapeze Act for Grandma Berta, that this book engenders hope. I hope it applies to all of our forebears and all of us with mothers or parents. I can only say as my advice to you, no matter how you feel about your parents, before they pop off, please be complete with them. Make sure you have self-expressed to the best of your ability your love for them, so that when they die, you can hold your head up and say that you've been a mensch, that you've done the best you can, and that so the last third of your own life is not haunted by incompletion.
Such great advice. We have a great question from the audience. Cheryl asked, do you feel that you chose strong female roles because you were brought up by a strong woman? Now, I should point out, in an actor's career, it's a push and pull between roles choosing you and you choosing roles.
That's right.
But I think if you look at your career, it is filled with these strong women, from Golda Meir to Danielle Melnick to when you played yourself. It's just full of these strong parts. And do you feel like that your special talent in doing that has to do with the strong role model you had?
Honestly, I think how this all got birthed was my name change. I was born Terry Sue Feldshuh. And when I was 18, I fell in love with Michael Fairchild, not of my faith. He was at Wesleyan, I was at Sarah Lawrence, and he was the most beautiful thing ever and so refined. And his forebears came to the United States. The United States came to the colonies in 1601. His grandfather went to Yale with horse and carriage, and my grandfather ran from the pogroms of Minsk-Gubernia, and the Tsar and the Cossacks. So when we fell in love, he was so new and such, not forbidden territory, but such otherness that fascinated me. And one day we were head to head in Matunic, Rhode Island. I had my first job at Theater by the Sea, and they said, "Do you have a stage name?" I said, "Oh, yes," because my name was Terry Feldshuh. And they said, "What's your stage name?" I said, "Terry Fairchild." Even took his name for the summer. And he was the one who said to me, "Terry Sue, what kind of a name is that for a Northern Jewish girl like you? You're not a Terry Sue. What else were you called?" And I said, "Well, I was called Tovah in Sunday school because I was embarrassed to say Tovah in Hebrew school. In fact, I went to Hebrew school 8 hours a week, Tuesday, Thursday, and Sundays in the conservative movement at Temple Israel Center in White Plains." And he said, "Tovah, now that's a name." And that was our love name. And then I decided to take it on. And my last legal document is Terry Sue Feldshuh, my graduation from Sarah Lawrence. And then I adapted the name Tovah Feldshuh. And Shakespeare says, "What's in a name? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet." The truth is there's a lot in the name, because nobody's life is about your life. Their life is about their life and their concerns. So the observed value, perceived value of the name Tovah Feldshuh is substantial, European, maybe Orthodox. She's a maven, whatever that is. Yentl sailed through my door. I had to audition, but I got it. Helena Slomov in Holocaust sailed through my door. Daniel Melnick sailed through my door. Eventually, Golda sailed through my door. That was after Vivian Gornick's A Fierce Attachment, which is a lesser-known piece I did, or Irena's Vow, where I played a Catholic, but she was a big Christian rescuer, or, of course, the Prime Minister, Golda Meir, and then finally, RBG. So I think that my perceived value influenced my ease in getting certain parts. And then, because I, like many Jewish kids, am a very, very diligent student. I love to study. I love to study now. It keeps me young, so that I begot mastery of this kind of vernacular, and what makes different kinds of strength. Even Dolly Levi, Mama Rose. I just did a piece called The Prompter by Wade Dooley, where I played this old actress that's finally coming back to the stage after a couple of decades away from it, and her struggle for mastery. So I feel very fortunate to do that. Even Deanna Monroe in The Walking Dead, she was the head of Alexandria and an ex-congresswoman, a senator from Ohio. So she was a protagonist, not an antagonist. She was a heroine. And it was a great role. It was a role model, and it was a great action doll. I became an action doll. I made my debut at Walmart. So I'm very excited.
I will confess, I've never seen an episode of The Walking Dead. It's not my genre, but
it's very well done, I have to say. It's very well done.
That's what I keep hearing. I get nightmares real easy. So, but you mentioned studying and this diligence that I think has clearly been a hallmark of your work. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the connection between that diligence and just not giving up. Obviously, you've had a very successful career, but no acting career is always easy, especially early on. It's just hard to get a career going and to sustain a career once it starts. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about, how you manage to keep going, to be diligent in the face of adversity, and all of the training that you found for yourself. And I in the book, I found this so impressive, how much training you just went out and found, right? It wasn't just,
Right.
It didn't just come to you through school. You had to go out and get it.
I did. It didn't come to me. My mother forbid me to go to Juilliard, and she'd say things like, "If you're going to act, you'll do it for the rest of your life. Now get an education." So she regarded acting as a trade, and not that she looked down at it, but she felt it was like carpentry. It was like my beautiful daughter Amanda went to MIT and majored in physics. Brandon went to Harvard, majored in economics, but Amanda had a notion to be an actress. And I said to her, it was a real Lilyism. I said, with a mind like that, you don't want to go to MIT and major in physics. So she did her higher tikkun, her higher purpose in life. Likewise, I had a very optimistic father, and I had a mother who was also a very hard worker. She was an excellent balabosta, excellent executive housewife, and cooked beautifully, and still had manicured nails and wore that shirtwaist with the polished cotton and the matching this and that. She was a real upper middle class Scarsdale housewife. My father even bought a horse, which was the state champion, and he became the president of Boulder Brook Riding Club, which had been restricted. But then they went in the red, and they needed their Jewish lawyer, and they let Sidney in, and then they elected him president. We got them back into the black. So I had two parents who worked very hard at what they did, no matter what they did. I think if they were carpet makers, they would have been great embroiderers of Persian carpets or whatever, of tapestries. So that was our only example. My brother was a Phi Beta Kappa at Dartmouth. We didn't know another way. It was funny. I was speaking with certain colleagues, and one person wrote me, when your mother spoke to your father and you were all at dinner, did you reluctantly go back to your homework? I said, reluctantly? Are you out of your mind? I don't know a Jewish child of any worth or diligence that didn't run to do their homework. And it wasn't a question of whether you liked it. I was never a great math student. You gave it your best shot. So let's go to this. I sent out 100 pictures and resumes in 1968 for summer stock. I wanted to do summer stock. I got 10 answers and 10 auditions. I got one offer, one. A Tunic, Theater by the Sea. But guess what? You only need one yes. That's all you need. And if you pick a life's work that you like so much or love that you don't have to check your watch, that it's not work for you, but it is your tikkun, it's your higher purpose. You're in like Flynn, because you're not gonna give it up. I, as an actor, it's not about the need for applause, it's about the need to transform. It's the cheapest form of therapy I know, because at 7:30, you drop your problems and you take on the skin and the neshama, the soul of another human being. You take on their stuff, and then you see what of their stuff applies to you, what doesn't. But you get yourself out of your own little world. Look at what narcissism has done to this country. It's almost killed us. It has killed hundreds of thousands of us. But that signals the death of the planet. So if you want to live a little life, good luck to you. It's a piece of crap for the rest of us. So I love doing my work. I pursued my work. And even when I was told I had no talent, and I was told it quite readily at the Guthrie Theater, 18 months after I left the Guthrie Theater and I was told I'd never be an actress, I was on the marquee of the Eugene O'Neill Theater on Broadway, where the Book of Mormon is now, in a play called Yentl by Isaac Bashevis Singer. And that comes from the ability never to give up. I wasn't going to be wasn't going to let the external judgment of me kill me off. It hurt me, but it didn't kill me off. You have to be internally driven to where your aliveness sits and pursue it with loyalty. When I was a pianist, I was a little pianist, a very serious one actually, and I couldn't win concertos at National Music Camp. And then I couldn't stand my own mediocrity because I'd only get to the finals, I wouldn't win. Oh, it's in Michigan, of course. Sound the call to dear old Interlochen. Yeah, I love Michigan. I love Ann Arbor, Kenny Fisher, many of the students from many of the campers at Interlochen then ended up at U of M. And I love Detroit. I played the Berman Center. They've been so good to me. And at the JCC at Bloomington, I have never seen a swimming pool like that in my life. Thank you so much. So when I couldn't win concertos, I said maybe I should try it for plays with music, and I immediately got a part. And my first part was Cousin Hebe in HMS Pinafore. And she sings like 2 lines. And we are sisters and his cousins and his aunts. I remember the line. But I was chosen from 110 campers. There were 3 singing parts, the lead, Buttercup, and Hebe. And I got Hebe. So I said, this bodes well. And I just didn't give up. I did apply to Harvard Law School. I made the wait list because I was very close to my father. And it's interesting that I wrote Lilyville and not Sydneyville. But Lilyville was the dominating force of my life because what? She was always there. And when you think of what she sacrificed to always be there, talk about service over self. Didn't she have dreams? She had dreams of getting her master's and being a teacher. She just didn't do it. Didn't do it.
You know, you mentioned loyalty and being driven. And I think, you know, a lot of young performers get this advice, you know, in a way, it boils down to haters gonna hate, you do you kind of advice. And I think that, you know, I feel like that messaging has become somewhat prominent, partially to counteract what traditionally has been very unhealthy trends in the way performers are trained. And I say this because, you know, for those of you who don't know, before I came to this position, I was an orchestra conductor. So I survived conservatory at the graduate level. And I use that word survived on purpose. I loved it in some regards, but it can be crushing. And I think what's interesting is that you don't say, you know, ignore advice, ignore criticism, like you do you, right? I think your message of loyalty and, you know, going with that drive, especially paired with the kind of work ethic that you have, is really important for young performers. So any young performers in the audience, heed the message of Tovah Feldshuh.
And take in people. People are not out to kill you unless they're psycho, and maybe some are. You have to discern that for yourself. My greatest teacher, my first teacher was Uta Hagen. And if you think about my relationship to my father, I picked when I was chosen by a very nurturing teacher, Uta Hagen. Everybody thought that they were her favorite student because she would not criticize the actor, she would redirect. So when I coached Amanda's soccer team for the 5-year-old to 10-year-old girls for the city of New York, I did not criticize them. I redirected. Coach, I just made a goal with my hand. I would say, fabulous. I have an idea. Why don't we try making a goal since we're on a soccer field? Why don't we make the goal with our foot? How about our foot? Let's try our foot. So that's what I learned from Uta Hagen, how she trained me. And when I wasn't nurtured, I would go back to earlier similar, and that was what was so dogged. That's what when Langham and Hirsch lacerated me in front of an entire company of people. And don't forget, we come from a religion that says when you kill a person's reputation in public, when you hurt a person and slander a person in public, it's as if to kill them, because it's like taking a feather pillow and slitting it open in the town square. And even if it's not true, you will never be able to collect feathers again. But those 2 men really believed you want to be an actress and why don't you act? Otherwise, become an accountant. Yeah, you should be an accountant. Right in front of 30 people. I was the youngest in the company. I was playing the first fairy, Peas Blossom, in the Midsummer Night's Dream. So when people did that, it was so shocking, but it reminded me of mommy. So it was really a challah knife in my heart. and I had to get up and get over it. But guess who was in Minnesota with me? My brother David. There was always a pillar of positivity around me. And as I go through my life, I realize I produce those things. If I can't find it, I go look for it. And it's early or similar. I had unconditional love from one of my parents, expressed, I mean, in a way I could understand it. And that was my father, Sidney. And I reproduce him and the feelings I had with him as much as I can. And I also think it's a big flaw. Blame is the lowest form of consciousness. So those of you who are teachers, if you're trying to dismantle a student, it's not an equal ground. It just makes you a bully. If they're disrespectful, I guess you can tell them, I would like you not to speak to me that way. And you may even say it publicly. But to tear them apart or to make them feel stupid or worthless is just, it's the lowest of the low. And, you know, yeah. I wouldn't say my mother criticized me a lot, but well, she tried to fix me all the time. If you're trying to fix somebody all the time, the message is you're not making it. You don't make it. And as long as I stayed within Lily's parameters of behavior, I was given a bit of applause. But when I went outside those parameters of behavior, not so great. So my acting teachers would say, you know, you give Feldshuh a part with a huge obstacle and she'll always be brilliant. We were talking about St. Joan, Yentl, huge obstacles. Golda Meir, the 73 war, because earlier similar. I had a huge obstacle in my early life, which is that I didn't think my mother loved me and I could not connect with her. I picked yellow flowers for her and I gave them to her from the vacant lot in the wildflowers across the street on Penn Boulevard. When I brought it to her, she said, these are weeds. These are dandelions.
That's tough.
It was tough, and she didn't meet my feelings, telling me the truth. There was truth, but it was so.
Yeah. So I want to take a question from the audience. Just a reminder to those of you watching at home, you can text a question to the number on your screen in that corner, or you can put your comments in the comment box below. Judy asks, what career would your mom have chosen for you if she got to choose?
I write that in the book. She says, what about being a lawyer or a doctor? I couldn't get over it. And this was, gender equality wasn't even a zygote in the bellies of my mother. So the professions usually assigned to men in her generation, she was able to access, which was lawyer, doctor, professor. Those were our three things. She didn't ask me to become, and I'm not disparaging it because it's very important. She didn't ask me to become a nursery school teacher or a kindergarten teacher. She said a professor. So I think she would have been easier if I had had an illustrious career in the things my children majored in university. And I didn't even push them. I was just an actress, you know, I was just the wackiest part of the family. That's what she saw for me. But the most important role for my mother was the MRS degree. When I married Andrew Harris Levy, who went to Andover and went to Harvard and went to Harvard Law and drove his sports car and was a hugely successful lawyer in the biggest firms in the world. Great. You know, my father had a small office and was a great litigator, but it was a boutique, as many litigators were in those days. Andy always was with the big time, represented the Japanese government and all this. You know, like I was playing Peter Pan at the Municipal Opera House, 11,000 people a night in St. Louis, the biggest house in America, flying across a 110-foot stage, flown by Foy, the people who flew Mary Martin. And I said, I said to him, you know, he said, what did you do today? I said, oh, I put on my green costume, my green tights, my little shoes, and I put my harness on. I flew across saying, I have a place where dreams are born. And I said, what did you do? He said, well, I sold the King Ranch in Texas. So he had a very, very big life as an attorney. And I think that my mother was into preserve and protect your young. And once that anchor entered my life, and I wasn't even a wild Indian. Sorry, I'm sure it's not even politically correct. Please forgive me. I wasn't a Vilde Chaya. There you go. I wasn't a crazy run around go person with boys. I had judgment and was brought up pretty clearly and pretty strictly, and never was on the Hollywood casting couch. I was told not to be so intellectual, but I would have none of it. And a lot of people of worth would have none of it. So don't ever think you have to trade your body for a role. You don't have to do that. It's your decision. You can do it if you feel you need it, but you don't get my blessing. There's too much stuff out there too. Too many diseases. Be careful. Anyway, that's
some sage advice.
That's my story. Yeah, that's my story.
You know, it's interesting. It's interesting, I think, to see how your mother sort of calms down once you have that, as they say, the MRS degree.
Right.
And your husband does feature prominently in this book. So tell us a little bit about that. How did that happen?
Well, first of all, again, I loved my father. And sometimes I teach at Yale, and I say, you may not remember a person's name. You'll probably remember their face. You will always remember. The cells in your body will remember how you feel around a person. And I used to feel great around my father. Even when things were bad, I would say, Dad, how are you? He'd go, great. And he'd just turn a sow's ear into a silk purse. And as I write in the book, he would take me to ride Playland. He'd go on all the rides with me. And I mean, over the top, the bumper cars, the big roller coaster, and the tough stuff. He didn't just sit and watch. I rebirthed the world for my father. That's how I felt, as my grandchildren rebirthed the world for me, and as my children did. When I'm with Raphael, our oldest grandchild, and watch him be fascinated by his mother's shoes and wanting to put on his mother's shoes and try it too, to walk around in his mother's shoes. The metaphor is very, very strong about wanting to be with the parent. And the kid is fantastic because he's been beautifully brought up. But anyway, my father had this, what was your question? This unbridled love for me. What was your question?
How did you meet your husband, essentially?
Of course, my husband, right. My father had this unbridled love for me, and it felt good around him. So I usually went out with boys where it felt good. If it didn't feel good, I remember being at Yale one weekend, and my boy I was dating hit me. I'll never forget it. He hit me. And he thought I was teasing him. I was a virgin and whatever. And I wasn't teasing him. And I said, this relationship is over. And he said, no, it's not. I said, yes, it is. I'm out of here. And he said, why? I said, because I'm Sidney Feldshuh's daughter. How dare you? How dare you touch me like that? And he later, incidentally, was brought up on charges for abusing his wife. Very interesting. In all events, I met Andrew through my best friend at National Music Camp, Lori Levy. And she was a peppy, marvelous actress. I was a piano major. She was a drama major. And we looked alike. And there was a very strict uniform code at Interlochen because 2,000 campers came from all over the world, rich and poor and black and white and Asian and Caucasian. And it was a wonderful UN of talent. And Dr. Maddie, who was alive at that time, was at the end of his life, he was alive, was very strict about the uniform code because we all had to be on equal footing. Anyway, we looked alike, we became best friends, and she had this older brother. And I didn't see much of him because I would go visit her in Washington, D.C., and the older brother was at Andover, and the older brother was at Harvard. And then I was in Minnesota on a scholarship for the McKnights, paid for my years in Minneapolis and for my master's. And then I came to Broadway. And she actually said to him, he was already a lawyer, becoming a partner in his first law firm, Aaron Fox, down in Washington. Why don't you go see my friend Terry Feldshuh? She's starring in a play called Yentl. And on February 16th, 1976, Andrew Harris Levy came to the Monday matinee, the Washington's birthday matinee on President's Weekend of Yentl. And he was allowed backstage because he was Lori Levy's brother. Incidentally, sadly, there was an armed guard at that show because it was a Jewish play. And when I did Golda Meir, we also had an armed guard. Sad to say. Sad to say. Nothing ever happened, but I was escorted to my car every night. And the man who drove me was an ex-Marine on both occasions, and they packed a weapon. It's really, really weird. Really a shame. In all events, nothing ever happened. So he came backstage, and he was just the cat's meow. He would look gorgeous in his Burberry raincoat and his full head of hair and this auburn mustache, and I was a little worried about my appearance because I was dressed as an Orthodox Jewish boy. So from the front, I looked like Lillian Gish, but from the back, I looked like Larry Tisch. As long as we were eyeball to eyeball, we were fine. And he asked me out for coffee after the matinee. He was very impressed with my work. Well, the bigger the transformation in a role, the greater the actor gets credit. So Rosalind in As You Like It gets more credit than Celia. Or Violet in Twelfth Night gets more credit than Olivia. So Yentl had to sacrifice her female identity and dress in the garments of a young boy to become a scholar in a yeshiva. And the transformation was enormous. I cut my hair on stage every night. I had 8 weeks a week. And he loved my work. He asked me for coffee, and I said, I'm not going out with you. You've got to go back to Harvard and marry a Radcliffe teacher. He said, Mary, I'm just asking you out for coffee. And 4 months later, he proposed. We were watching the Mikado at the Kennedy Center, and he wrote on my arm, Marryme, very quickly. And he didn't think I picked it up, and I picked it up. I almost dislocated my neck during the chorus of Mia Sama, or Nayamaya. And when we got back to his apartment, he did get on one knee. And he said, Tovah Feldshuh, will you marry me? And I said, of course. And he said, when? I said, let's not get ahead of ourselves. But we married on his birthday a few monher later. We'd known each other only 13 months. We met February 16th, and we married March 20th of the following year. And,
I don't remember this from the book that you got married on his birthday. That is, weddings near birthdays is also a tradition in my family. So wow. I'm wondering if this is, people in the comment section, tell us, is this a thing that Jews do? And I thought it was just us.
It's not that. It's as Andy said, this way he'll never forget our anniversary.
Right? So
we're together 43 years, and wouldn't trade him for anything. And I just say to those of you who are married, as long as the big pillars are in place, fidelity, no drugs, no alcoholism, nobody beating you up. Even if there's some verbal problems, you can always go to a therapist and work on how to speak to one another. But if you married for love, love always comes back. And I suggest you don't leave the field of play, because I can tell you at this stage of my life, in my third act, let us say, in the last third of my life, I don't know what I'd do without Andy. And the empty nest is highly underrated. It's really a great gift, and I think it extends our lives. So those of you who are not married, stay in touch with other people. Don't be lonely. Don't be encapsulated in your own little planet. Reach out, particularly now that we can't touch each other and we have to be 6 feet apart. Wild, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we only have a few minutes left, but I do want to take a couple more questions from the audience. Naomi asks, how was Lily, your mother, as a grandmother to your children?
I write about that too, Naomi, and I hope you'll buy the book. She was so outrageously emotional and expressive, so that it wasn't bittersweet, but it was both satisfying and wonderful and sad for me, because I didn't get the benefit of that when I was the age of my children. She just was a blossoming angel. I would love to. Can I show some pictures of
Yes,
Lily and
please.
me?
Just click that share screen button again.
Yeah. Where's my share screen? It's down at the bottom. Okay.
Yep.
I'm going to click the share screen. Is this it? I'm clicking it, and it just says, let's see.
You just select the PowerPoint.
Click. All I have to do is click the share screen.
And then something will pop up.
I see share screen. Got it.
There we go.
And then then, oh, good. Great.
There we go.
And then there's LILYVILLE. That's my bat mitzvah. And the reception was in my home. And this is Mother and me when I was over 6 weeks old, and she had already long stopped breastfeeding, much to my chagrin. This is Mother and me in This is Mother and I, excuse me, subjective case in Hollywood. Look at the hair. And by this time I was married, so you could see she was much happier with me. That's Pippin. That's when I did that full out trapeze act while I was singing, "Oh, it's time to start living." This is Hello, Dolly. I loved that role. My mother was dying during that production, and then she became a medical experiment at Columbia Presbyterian, and they saved her life, and she would live till 103. This is Golda. I rate your parts by how you look. Golda Meir is a 0. So that's that. There's Juliet, a very Italian Juliet for Jack O'Brien at the National Shakespeare Festival. There's Helena Slomova from Holocaust, who was the Czech freedom fighter. And that's what it looks like when you're 24 or 25 years old with no makeup. God, I remember those days. This is Danielle Melnick in Law and Order. Come on, Jack. This is The Walking Dead, where I played Deanna Monroe, head of Alexandria, marvelous heroine, marvelous role model, and a marvelous action doll. And this is what I had to do for it. There I am as a walker. We weren't allowed to use the word zombie. And it's a very popular, I still get fan mail, and they always like those kind of pictures. This is my playing the piano at my bat mitzvah. Note the single chair. I write about the single chair, because that sent a very big message to me. There's my brother David, my father Sidney, and my mother in her custom-made hat. And here I am with Amanda Clare. I was her Suzuki mentor at home, her home teacher, and we played many, many duets together. This was at Windows on the World for my mother's 85th birthday. May the people who lost their lives in 9/11 rest in peace. This is the marvelous Rachel Bloom, who played Rebecca Bunch, and I played Naomi Bunch, her mother, in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. This is Patty Lupone, who was my rabbi for a Bunch family bar mitzvah on the East Coast. Remember how we suffered. This is a rap number I did for my daughter, Rebecca Bunch. And once again, like Lily, she was a great disappointment. How a person like that came out of my body, I don't know, when she did a rap. So you want her should be known as a mother of a loser. Meet my daughter, once a lawyer, now a failure, please excuse her. And you want that I should see the look upon the rabbi's face when she learns that Miss Ivy League attorney is a disgrace. Forget it, forget it. You can just forget it, forget it. So that's that. I felt like a Valkyrie. I loved that show. It was so great. It demanded such skill. I was so happy I could sing and dance. This is Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the last great role I played before the pandemic. It was the Los Angeles premiere of Sisters-in-Law, and just working on her posture was a labor of love. Let me tell you, it was really something to do that and still feel okay. And this is with the Supreme Court Justice in her chambers.
Hold on, she's taller than you. Back up just a second. Is she taller than you?
She's wearing heels, and I was wearing flats. Okay. We're just about the same height. Okay. But she was the greatest. But I had to thin my face when I played her. You see that my face is wider, that Ukrainian Galiziana jaw, and she has more of an oval face. And this is Mother and I at the 100th birthday of Walt Disney, the Disney World of Magic. We were invited down as VIPs, and we were in the parade. I remember Joyce, our phenomenal caretaker, had to hold Mother's legs, her knees, so she wouldn't fall out of the convertible. We were sitting on the back of it. And that is part of Lilyville, dear Jamie.
Wow.
So there we go.
Well, thank you so much for your time this evening. It's been so lovely speaking with you.
Thank you.
Don't forget, everyone, here is the link where you can purchase the book. It's a long link. You can click it from the chat. It's pre-order it now because you want it the moment it comes out. I think one of my favorite things about it is that I could hear you. It was like you were in the room with me telling me all of these wonderful stories, and it just made it impossible to put down. So thank you so much for the book. Thank you for being here with us tonight, and thank you for all that you've done for the world on stage. Thank you.
It's my pleasure and honor, and thank you, those of you who are my personal friends like Toby Taub and Rabbi Alicia Magal for tuning in tonight for the Detroit Jewish Book Festival. It's a marvelous festival.
Thank you so much. It's been something putting it together this year, and we've been so glad that everyone could join us from home. So Thank you to all of you who are joining us from home. Thank you again to Tovah Feldshuh. And we hope that you all can join us for more events. The film festival, the book fair, I know what day it is, I promise. The book fair goes until December 9th. There's plenty more events going on. We hope you will join us. Our next event is tomorrow morning, which is Sunday, December 6th. We begin at 9:30 a.m. with another in our Mitten Morning series, where we'll be talking with Ruth Behar, author of Letters from Cuba. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great night.